Welcome to Bridging Gaps, the business podcast sharing the challenges and stories of fellow business owners.
Hello and welcome to the last episode in Season 1 of Bridging Gaps, the business podcast. This week, I'm in conversation with Daniel Priestley, entrepreneur, best-selling author, professional speaker, and co-founder of Dent Global. Please join me in welcoming Daniel to the show. Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Thank you for having me on your show.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Daniel, as co-founder and CEO of Dent Global, perhaps we could start just by you telling us a little bit about Dent Global.
Yeah, so we run entrepreneur business accelerators in about 7 cities around the world. We take people who are typically past that very first phase of business, so they're kind of normally 6-figure revenue and up, and we take them through a 12-month accelerator program to grow and develop their business. They get to work alongside people who have built multi-100-million-pound businesses, best-selling authors, award winners, who take groups of people through this 12-month acceleration process. We started in 2010 with a small group here in London. We're now in Australia, Singapore, the UK, and the USA. And then along the way, I've also written 4 books on entrepreneurship about how to scale up through the entrepreneurial journey. So that's most of my time. I'm kind of up to my elbows in entrepreneurs.
Which is a great place to be. And I know you have some views on entrepreneurs, not on entrepreneurs, but on the entrepreneurial journey in terms of sometimes it kind of comes across as being kind of rose tinted, doesn't it? And I think that you don't see it in that way. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, it can absolutely be wonderful. And it can also be pretty horrible. So I think for most people, it shouldn't be called entrepreneurship. It should be called entrepreneurship. It's just, it's a tough journey. It's lonely and it's difficult and it's a lot of complexity. And when you're in your own entrepreneurial journey, it feels like you just face brick wall after brick wall. And then, fortunately, I've got this different perspective because I sort of get to stand back from hundreds of entrepreneurs and see them going through the journey and see them at all the different stages. So I get this unique perspective as to how fast you can go because I kind of have a little bit of distance from the businesses and I see probably 1,000 businesses per year. So I kind of see that the brick walls are very, very small and we can get through them. But I absolutely know that there's a lot of hard realities of running a business. So I think I even wrote a whole blog about the 7 harsh truths of entrepreneurship, which the first one is like, it's hard and it gets harder. You are dealing with complexity, you're solving people's problems, you all of those sorts of things. So it's like any professional sport. The more successful you become, the bigger and stronger the opponents become as well.
So it's not necessarily that the brick walls disappear, you're just more able to deal with them.
Yeah, exactly, right? So there's no such thing as balls that just stay up in the air, but there are people who get good at juggling and they make it look effortless. So that's the goal, to get to that place. With that said, right, it's hard and it's difficult, but there are 2 absolutely wonderful places that you can end up as an entrepreneur. There are 2 kind of like sweet spots, the best, most fun parts of being in business. So one is when you have what's called a lifestyle boutique. And a lifestyle boutique is typically 3 to 10 people, all working around someone who's known as a key person of influence in their industry. And it's a really dynamic, fun, engaged, small team. And, punching well above its weight, doing so many things in the world, not limited by geography, working with a great product that people love, having a couple of thousand raving fans who absolutely adore the business. That's the typical kind of lifestyle boutique, and that's just bliss. That's wonderful. And then the second place that's really fun, if you're cut out for it, would be a high performance business. And high performance business is typically 50 to 150 employees. It's highly funded. It has external funding, so there's millions of pounds worth of investment going in. You get to hire all the best people You've got a big, exciting vision behind the business. You're making an impact. You're achieving, a lot of financial rewards. All of those things. If you cut out for it, that's kind of a fun place as well.
And what do you think? How would somebody determine if they were cut out for it? Is it just something they know? Because I think a lot of the times we aspire to a success that we maybe believe we're cut out for, but learn the hard way that we're not. Do you have any, I guess, advice on that?
Well, when I say cut out for, it also has a lot to do with the business itself and the market conditions. There's a lot that's not about the entrepreneur as well, right? So, had Mark Zuckerberg started out running a hair salon, I don't think he'd be a multi-billionaire right now. It has nothing to do with who he is. It has everything to do with, a very good fit between who he is and the actual timing of the market and the product that he chose, and the technology that was available at that moment in time. So it's not something that you sit there and say, "Oh, I'm not good enough," and all of that sort of stuff. But in many ways, what happens is you find yourself in a business with very, very fast growth. So the problems that you're experiencing are keeping up with growth problems, not trying to create customers' problems. And so the marketplace is biting your arm off to get whatever it is that you have, and then you achieve what's called ultra high revenue per employee. So businesses that are doing, say, £150,000 per employee and above, that's got the makings of a performance business. So let's say you had a team of 5 people and you had £750,000 revenue. Or more than that, that would be a good indicator that you're probably sitting on something that's potentially scalable. It has very little to do with ambition. Almost every young entrepreneur, especially without kids, is sitting there saying, I would really love to grow a big, exciting, exitable business worth tens of millions of pounds, and I'll do whatever it takes. But ultimately, you need to see some of those business metrics telling you, yes, this business it's the moment. The moment has arrived for this business.
So some of it is being just on that edge of having created something which has captured people's imaginations or minds and is now driving them to want what you're offering as much as what you're bringing to the plate.
Yeah. And what you'll typically find is that a performance business can often start out as a very successful lifestyle boutique. So you often find that there was, 3 to 12 people in an office doing £2 million worth of revenue. And then they went and spoke to some funders about this, and the funders had a look at the business and said, "Oh my goodness, you've got something that's really scalable here. Let's put £2 or £3 million investment into this," and away it goes. So in many cases, if you're not sure, then the correct answer is just build yourself a really great little lifestyle boutique, and see how successful you can make that little business, and make sure that you don't. I guess one of the key things is don't hire more than 12 people, or don't have more than 12 people on the team until such time as you know what you want to do with it, because business is very, very, very hard between 12 and 50 employees. At that moment, you're too big to be small and too small to be big. So you're kind of this no man's land, and a lot of businesses are very successful with 10 people. And then at 15, 16, 17, they're losing money. They're seeing all sorts of dramas and all sorts of problems creeping in. And they either have to figure out what they have to do to go forward, or in most cases, they go back to 8 people and sort of lick their wounds for a little bit.
It's hard, isn't it? Because without talking to people like yourself or other people who've been through it, there is, kind of the assumption that you can keep adding people to it, and that, yes, there's a bit of pain in bringing somebody on and onboarding them, but realizing the dynamics of people working together and what happens as that team grows and grows and it ceases to become just your baby.
Yeah.
I think it is where it's good to have your experience and others' experience around that. Actually, this can be painful, and you need the right things in place to make it work.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at something like the military, it's 1,000 years of HR experiments. And the military has arrived at the magical number of 8. So they break the entire military up into what's called sections, and a section is 8 people. And you have a section commander, who's the person who's in charge, and then there's a person who is supporting them, so a second in charge, and then you've got 6 people who are equally ranked as infantry. But it's interesting. Like, think whatever you think about the military. I'm not talking about the military as a great example of all things, but it is interesting from a HR perspective that if the military thought that they could have teams of 10, 11, 12, or 15 with one commanding officer, surely they'd try that. Or if they thought that it was a smaller team, they might try that if there was higher performance. But after 1,000 years of trying different things, they've arrived at this kind of magical number of 8 people is about the right size group for getting a high performing team together. And then what they do is they have teams of 8, and then they go up to a new level of command, and then up to a new level of command. And essentially it's broken into, it's little teams of 8, which turns into teams of 800, 100,000 or 80,000. But actually what's fascinating is we see the same in business as well. So when you think about a high performing company, you actually end up with 5 or 6 divisions that are about 8 people, with a management and leadership team of about 8 people. And that gives you about, ballpark 50 people. And that's actually when the business then clicks back into gear, and away it goes, the performance business.
So suddenly everybody is now working well together. They've got their little tribe, I guess, of people that they know well and work with.
Yeah.
And you can see it because I know, for myself, and I know some people love big groups of people, but I tend to prefer a smaller group. And the larger it gets, the more difficult I find it to connect with those people individually and to have that relationship. So for me, I can relate to the idea that the small team is going to give you that intimacy, I guess, to be able to know each other well enough to support one another and to deliver what you need.
Well, there's some ideas here that, like, the human brain thinks in terms of families and tribes. So when you have a team of 3 to 12 people, the brain kind of automatically clicks together that this is a family, that we're all working together on a project, and we look out for each other the same way a family would look out for each other. When families hit 12 people, they kind of break into 2 families or 3 families. They kind of get into little factions. And then a tribe of people is like 50 to 150 people. So what happens is that these little teams, these lifestyle boutiques, have very much a family culture. They often eat together, they go out and have lunch all as a team, and they go to the movies as a team, and they buy little presents for each other on a regular basis. All this sort of stuff happens inside that lifestyle boutique. When you get up to the 50 to 150, they behave like a tribe. So they have the team of hunters who go off and hunt together, and they have the team of gatherers who gather together, and they have their colors that they wear, and they have their kind of their group mission and their group leader, and they have fireside chats, and they kind of, like, all of even the words that come together around those high performing teams of 50 to 150 are very tribal, whereas the words that are used with small teams is very familial. So it's obviously very much part of human behavior.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? How, we've been around for so long, and we've come so far in terms of technology and all of those things that we can now do that, people from 100 years ago, actually people from even, 50 years ago, who were reaching the end of their life would probably be going, oh my God. I don't mean they were 50 years old and reaching the end of their life. But, and yet there's still these base instincts that we have that are just haven't really shifted. I know they talk a lot in psychology and things around the lizard brain that hasn't evolved at all.
Yeah, and that's actually a huge part of entrepreneurship. So, and a lot of top entrepreneurs talk about this, the reptile brain or the lizard brain or the limbic system is very much your worst enemy when you're in entrepreneurship, because when you're in a corporate environment, So there's kind of like three parts of the brain. There's the part of the brain that is like we're dealing with an immediate survival threat, and that's fight, flight, freeze. So it's essentially, that rhinoceros walks up and kind of starts breathing heavily through its nostrils, and it's like, am I going to run? Am I going to try and fight this thing? Am I going to be really still and let it pass? Like, these are my only options when it comes to dealing with a genuine survival threat. So that part of the brain is very, very geared towards there's no other option. It's fight or flight or freeze. And then when we get up to the day-to-day running of our lives, this is the mammalian brain, the part of the brain that is very much, it's big and chunky. It loves to be trained in how to do something and just repeat the process. So let me do it. It's kind of like, show me how to do it once or twice, then I'm just going to do it every single day. Give me the box of cornflakes, and that's breakfast, and I'll just have breakfast every day, the box of cornflakes. And at night I'll get home and I'll have this kind of meal because I'm familiar with that. Then I'll watch Netflix because I'm familiar with that. Then I'll go to bed in the same way, in the same place. And it's all nice and smooth. I'll go to work and I'll go home and I'll pay my taxes and kind of that monkey brain. And then there's this annoying part of the brain that entrepreneurs seem to have, which is this visionary part of the brain, constantly coming up with new ideas, constantly thinking about, why don't I change humanity? Why don't I change the world? Why don't I have a bigger impact in the world? Why don't I do something meaningful with my life? Why don't I create something that's never been created before? Why don't I join some sort of amazing high performance team? Why don't I go and walk the earth? Right? So it's kind of like this big visionary part of the brain. And when you're in corporate, you almost never deal with a survival threat, because corporates are built to kind of not allow their team to feel a sense of survival threat. So, you've got HR departments and you've got policies, and you're not allowed to, do certain things. And even if you're really not hitting your targets, that could go on for 3 to 6 months while you have performance review 1, performance review 2. Suddenly you're on someone's radar, and now you're being performance managed out of the organization over 3 or 4 months, right? So the process of not performing to reaping some sort of consequence could be 9 months in a corporate environment, in most corporate environments. Even corporates that are very aggressive could be 3 to 6 months, but it's certainly not an immediate survival threat. And even if they do make you redundant, they're probably going to give you, 2 or 3 months worth of pay to go find something else, right? So there's no survival threats going on. And likewise, even if you're the CEO of a large organization, it's very hard to go visionary, because let's say you've got hundreds and hundreds of employees. Trying to turn that ship into a new direction, it's just so slow and so painful. It's never going to happen. You want to change the brand of coffee in the coffee machine. That's going to take a month or 2, right? So in the corporate world, you almost never face a survival threat, but you also never face a visionary opportunity. And then you move into this world of entrepreneurship, where if you lose a serious client, oh my God, are you having a survival threat? If you didn't provision enough for your tax bill, and suddenly you now have this tax bill, that you thought it was going to be 15,000 and it's 25,000, and you're like, whoa, okay, where am I going to get an extra 10,000 from? All of these things happen on a regular basis for entrepreneurs. So that's a very real survival threat. Poor performance. If an entrepreneur goes and presents 10 sales meetings and gets 0 sales, they're having a real kind of like heart palpitation. And likewise, the other thing's true, which is that if an entrepreneur watches an amazing TED talk that says, get out there and, do X, Y, and Z, the entrepreneur can go totally visionary and go, wow, actually, I'm going to bake that into the DNA of my business from day one. An entrepreneur might watch a webinar about how to set up auto-click funnels that generate amazing leads from, the sky all the time on autopilot. It's like, whoa, I'm going to go and do that. And so you end up with these high highs, low lows, high highs, low lows. And somewhere in the middle, you've also got to run your business. So you've got to do the monkey brain stuff as well. So having a good working understanding as to how the brain works is actually almost essential for getting into this entrepreneur world. It's incredibly difficult if you don't have an awareness that your brain is basically doing certain things or running certain behaviors. It can really freak you out that you're suddenly like, who am I? I'm snapping at my kids and my spouse, and I'm also like, thinking of myself as the visionary. It's like, whoa, what's going on in my head?
And I think as well, you get, especially for people, like myself, who've come out of a corporate environment, who've come out of something which was, giving them a regular income. There's that pressure around you from your family and friends who are questioning what you're doing, especially when you're on that dip down, and asking, shouldn't you be doing something different? As opposed to staying on what to them seems like a roller coaster that's just, doesn't have a safety net at the bottom.
Yeah.
Not that
Yeah,
I'm sure that roller coasters have safety nets, but
well, I'm sure there's some safety built in. Yeah.
exactly. So can I just go back a little ways,
Sure.
Daniel, because you didn't come from a corporate environment and decide that you would be an entrepreneur. You started off at a very early age, and we're in a job that you then, I believe, left and started up. By the age of 21, starting that entrepreneurial journey. It'd be great to
Yeah.
hear about.
And well, I mean, even to describe it as a job was pretty overstating things, because I joined a company when it was 4 employees. I was employee number 4, and we built very rapidly up to 60 people in 2 years. And my income was actually, I was brought on as a commission only salesperson. So if I didn't sell, I didn't eat. So I was actually in year 1, I was running a business within a business, which was just basically making sales. And then in year 2, I ran a business within a business, which was that I carved out a division that took, we were working in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, and I carved out a division that would go to Hobart, Bendigo, and Cairns, in these kind of like regional areas. And essentially, if I didn't make sales, I didn't have enough money to pay myself, because I isolated that division within the company. I created a P&L that was separate from the company's P&L in order to go and do that. So the only real jobs I've actually ever had was McDonald's, working in the kitchen and out the front, and then working behind a bar, and then doing Pizza Hut delivery driving. All of those jobs were very much hourly or per delivery pay. But outside of that, I've never actually had a job.
So how did you know is probably the question. When you left school, did you know that you didn't want to go down a particular route, or were you just looking for something that was going to pay you some money, or did you have a vision already at that point?
Weirdly, I 100% knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. So there was never any question at all in my head. It was, I'm going to go start a business. I'm going to own a business. I'd had some experiences in, just little experiences through my teenage years. My mum was on the local council and local government, and she was working in politics, and some of the friends that she made, or some of the people that we met through that, were like pretty serious property developers. And there was one guy who I hung out with for the afternoon, and he owned a car dealership. He owned several major property development projects. He had a photographic studio that people were renting the space from. And I remember him driving around in his Porsche and saying to me, I said, sort of, how do you get a car like this? This is a really cool car. And he said, well, the trick is that right now, while we're talking, I'm getting paid in like 5 different ways. I'm like, how are you getting paid in 5 different ways? And he said, well, I've got this business and this business and this business and this business. And I can be sitting here chatting with you, and then that's how I'm making my money with all these different businesses. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. And he said, when you go to McDonald's, if you clock on and put your code into the machine, then you get paid. And as soon as you clock off, you don't get paid. Whereas I never clock off. And I'm like, wow. And then I got to know the owner of my McDonald's store, and he said the same thing. He said, that he was really committed to entrepreneurship, and that he had been part of McDonald's since very, very early days, and he had very quickly spun out and become a very first franchisee in Australia. And he owns 6 or 7 McDonald's locations, and basically, he shared with me, he said, I make $2 million a year without having to go to work, without doing anything. I just, you guys go and make the burgers and sell the burgers, and because I own the stores, and that's how it works. And I was like, wow, that's cool. So this was at a fairly impressionable age. I really was impressed by this idea.
And so when you went into that first, as you say, not necessarily really a job, but you started off, you were commission only. Did you know how to sell, or was that something that you then had to develop to be able to make money?
Well, I probably would say that I actually knew how to do the opposite of selling when I started. I was given a pile of very, very warm leads, and I made some sales pretty quickly. And it was just sort of like following up and, just retouching bases with people and collecting their credit card details and collecting their order forms and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, oh, okay, sales isn't this hard. And then once we got through all of those kind of warm leads, and I got given some cold leads, and I was like, whoa, this is really hard, right? How on earth are people meant to do this? And I had to get trained. I had to learn just how much of a sales profession, or what a profession that sales is. That it is really, it's like any profession. It's like a surgeon or a vet or an accountant. There are processes and there are procedures and there are, all of this sort of stuff, and a great deal of complexity in order to be a really good salesperson.
And when you, obviously were successful at that and decided to go out on your own, how did that feel? Was that, were you, cocky and confident and this is going to work, or were you nervous? How did it feel to be taking those steps to starting up your own thing? Even you'd already been running essentially your own business in a business.
Yeah, I felt a real sense of kind of loss, leaving this company that I felt that I'd helped to build. So from 4 to 60 people, I was employee number 4. So I felt like it was my business, and I felt a great sense of pride and ownership over it. But I realized that through a series of conversations with the founder, I realized that I had actually genuinely just become one of the 60. I was no longer special. I was doing some cool stuff, but ultimately, I didn't have shares. I didn't have any sort of gilded position in the organization. And also I was off track for being an entrepreneur, right? So I kind of realized that I'd learned a lot, but I wasn't going to learn much more unless I kind of bit the bullet and did it. Naturally, I had a great sense of hope and optimism, and then I came crashing down, and then I picked myself up. So I kind of went low lows, high highs, low lows, high highs, and that was Wednesday. So I had to go through and kind of work some stuff out.
And how did your family respond to that decision to go out on your own? Were they, supportive, or were they worried about you?
Well, the great benefit that I had was at 21, 22, my dad said something pretty wise to me, which is, he said, Dan, you can't fail. At this age, you can't fail. He said, if you start a business and you go cataclysmically off a cliff, yes, you just basically move back home to mum and dad, and, you've always got a roof over your head, and you've always got food in the fridge, and then you dust yourself off and you go and get another job, or you go and start another business. He said, this is a great time to be starting a business. You don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage, and it's not weird for you to live at home with your parents. You're 21, 22 years old. So, go have a good go at it. And that was kind of, that's incredibly fortunate. You only realize much later, or I only realized much later, having kids, because I've got 2 now and a third on the way, that, God, I mean, if we were talking right now, if I had a good solid corporate job, that was paying the bills and putting, food on the table and a roof over the family's head, you just don't have the luxury to kind of punt on what might be a good business idea.
Yeah, and it is that bravery. And I'm I've always been, while I was in the corporate world, I've always been a contractor. So
Yeah.
even though I've stayed in companies for actually quite a long time in some instances, there's always been this sense that I can leave or I will leave, and that it's going to obviously come to an end. And I think that changes your mindset about where you're going. And I've found some people that I know who've been in that company for years and years and years and are permanently employed. And I always think that they are actually incredibly brave to be able to take that leap of faith when they have those dependencies. They've got that family, they've got that house, and they've never tried to do it on their own. They've always, from early on been in that. And I think it is incredibly brave and quite inspiring for people to do that, because it's a lot to lose.
It is, yeah. And in which case, I think there's a different method for doing it. I think it's really important that for people who are going and leaving, when they've got dependents, it's really important that they're testing and they're kind of testing as many elements of the business as they can without breaching their employment contract. So perhaps they're attending some trade shows and actually setting up a little booth somewhere and talking to people and seeing if they can make some sales. Perhaps they're doing a little bit of sideline consulting if that doesn't breach their employment agreement. In the evenings or on the weekends or something like that. But they're, as much as possible, they're testing and testing and testing to see to see that they can actually do this. Because in some ways, starting a business doesn't have to be about bravery. I know people who have gone off and, on the day that they've left, they've pushed go on 4 $25,000 contracts, and they've lined that up. They're 12-month contracts. They know that they can handle maybe 6 to 8 contracts at a time. They've got 1 or 2 people supporting them who are all lined up, and then they've got $100,000 worth of commitments. And probably another 100 to 200 people to go and talk to and have a coffee with at some point to sign up the rest. In which case, it doesn't have to be about bravery. It's actually just nice, solid decision.
Yeah, absolutely. In that situation, as you say, it's very much planned, and it's much smoother.
And that's not a bad idea.
Oh no, not at all.
There's this kind of belief that you're not an entrepreneur unless you just bite the bullet and throw caution into the wind. I'll as the owner of an accelerator, seeing hundreds or thousands of businesses, I'll put my money on the person who's carefully planned it every day of the week, versus the person who's just randomly, I'm going to quit and figure it out.
Yeah, because I know for myself that I didn't actually have a plan to leave. It was just I was in a contract that I wasn't happy with, and I decided that I needed to end that, which, for me, sorry, not that I just normally randomly leave contracts, but, I would typically not look for another contract while I was in one. And it was when I left that one that I realized I didn't want to go back into another one at that point in time. But it's taken a lot, and is still evolving, to figure out what I'm offering, because I hadn't come out with that idea. And so figuring out what it is that you want to offer and what people want is huge.
Yeah. Asking lots of questions, figuring it out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, and trying it. And of course, I'm trying it in a way that has a direct impact. If I get it wrong, and people aren't willing to pay, well, then I'm not getting paid. So it's one way of learning.
And that's one of the other harsh truths of entrepreneurship, that the marketplace doesn't care about your passion, doesn't care about how many hours you've put in, doesn't care about your personal situation, doesn't care about any of those things. It really just comes down to, do I see value in buying this product or not? I don't care if you're profitable or not profitable. I just going to make the decision based on whether I like the product or service. And the marketplace doesn't care whether you've taken 5 minutes or 5 years to come up with it. It just only cares about what it cares about.
Yeah, which is kind of fair, because it's not meant to be taking on your situation.
Well, the longer you spend in corporate, you get used to the idea that people care about all sorts of other things. that you can kind of coast in corporate based on, I'm really passionate and I really love this company and I love this brand and I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to put in some overtime, and kind of that will get you a year or two worth of leeway in corporate.
Yeah, exactly. It buys you something different. And you've also established, so this is one of the things I found in contracts, was that every time you start a new contract, you are into a completely different environment. And while you've got knowledge, you don't have the contacts, you don't have the context. You've got to go through this whole learning curve again. And the person that you used to be able to call up and say, shoot, this has just happened, I need some advice, or I need to know who to talk to. You don't know that person anymore.
They're no good to you anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an interesting journey. So along your way, Daniel, what kind of challenges did you face, within, because you've gone through a number of businesses now. You had your first one, which was
well, in the first 10 years, I kind of fundamentally changed the business every 2 years. So we went from like 0 to $1 million in the first 12 months, and then about 18 months in, we completely changed the business and went from 1 to 10 million in revenue. And then I changed country. I got out of that business and went to the UK, and then we like generated a £4 million business, and I was just jumping from I was having these epic 2-year adventures, and then kind of pivoting and changing a lot. So the whole time was about challenges. It was always constantly in startup mode, constantly new deals, new negotiations, new marketing materials, new brochures, new suppliers, new partners, all of that sort of stuff. I was reinventing every 2 years through my 20s, because I was just having a blast, and kind of like doing the whole looking for constantly about like, how do I take maximum risk to get as big as possible, as fast as possible.
And what kind of challenges were there? I guess what I'm thinking of is the ones that hit you, that bring you down, that are hard to come out of, as opposed to...
You mean day-to-day or existential?
Either. I think the ones that you think other entrepreneurs are going to relate to, that you're going, well, actually, there was a point where I thought it was all going wrong, or those types of things that are just, so one of the things
it's like all the time. I mean, the truth is that especially like, so things have stabilized a lot more now. I've been in this current business since 2010, so like a good 7 or 8 years. We run on our assets now. Every single week we have hundreds of people approaching us for doing work. We have a phenomenal team who have been with the company, for years. We have great products that people know and like. I've got 4 best-selling books in the marketplace. So there's a lot of stability now. But in the first 10 years, it was just elation followed by devastation, pretty much like day after day. Like it could be both of those in the same 24-hour period. And it could be anything from, I've spent £10,000 on an ad that hasn't worked, or we've just had a really great member of the sales team quit, who's been bringing in £100,000 a month, or it could be we had all sorts of stuff. We've got 2 really great employees who are sleeping together, and and they're kind of like weirding out the rest of the team, and then they're gonna have then predictably they have this crazy breakup, and it's like, now who goes, who stays, how do we manage that? It could be that we have a co-founder and director of the company who's insisting upon his wife being, in the business day to day, and that's not a good fit with our culture. Like all of that, you name it, I've been punched in the face with it.
And how do you deal with that? How do you take those things on, I guess, emotionally? How do you keep coming back out and hoping that elation's going to come back again? So some of those things hit people really hard. Some of them, they really take them down, and it's hard to see the way forward.
So fortunately, at that particular time, I had spent a year living on a mattress on a floor in a garage at like 19, maybe 18. I was 18 years old, and we had a 3-bedroom little tiny house, and there was 5 of us living there. And I had the single car garage I'd thrown down some rugs, and I had literally a shitty mattress on the floor, and freezing cold because one of my walls was a roll-up garage door, made of tin. And I would always remind myself that actually it was one of the happiest times of my life, right? So I was having a blast at 18 living like that. We would go out and have such an amazing time, and I was fit and healthy and having fun and all of those sorts of things. So throughout my 20s, I would, at one point I had, the big house and the 2 cars, great cars, and all the stuff, right? And partying and traveling and living quite an extravagant lifestyle. And I would always just remind myself, you know what? I'm actually totally happy to fall right back to a mattress on the floor in a garage. Now I can't say that to the same degree now because I wouldn't put my family through that. But that was one of the things I would always think. I would always think it's okay. I was happy with nothing. It's not so. If it goes worst case scenario, it won't be that bad. I'll still be fine. So that I would always think that, and I was also quite optimistic. Like I was always kind of like, we'll figure it out, and if we don't, we'll figure out the next thing. Yeah, I mean, I was just rapid. I was just fast to change. I involved team in decision making. Sometimes I'd just be smart enough to take an afternoon off and just go for a walk along the river and just think. And sometimes I handled it badly. Sometimes I threw a tantrum and threw my toys out the pram and swore at people or sent a nasty email that I shouldn't have sent or any of those dumb things. I've done it badly as well, really badly.
And do you think that now you've got, as you said, you've got the family, you've got the children, is your desire or capacity maybe to take on risk, has that changed? Are you more cautious now?
Yes. So I'm more cautious now, but I also have a different understanding of business. So I now understand what it means to run a balance sheet versus run a P&L. So running a P&L is all about generating leads and making sales. Running a balance sheet is managing assets. So I've kind of moved into a different phase of business, and the phase of business I'm in now is managing assets and making sure that we have productive assets in the business. And that could be people, it could be systems, it could be technology that we create and develop and commercialize. And I've also got a diverse group of business interests now. So I have a different, it's annoying because like you go from being a very, kind of flamboyant, ostentatious, ambitious entrepreneur to being more of a asset manager mindset. And I'm not saying I've got an asset manager's mindset, but I am kind of more on that side. So with family and kids now, I wouldn't put them through the lifestyle that I used to live unless they chose that on their own. I'd support them if ever they chose that, but I wouldn't put them through it. Because I was, and still am. I'm 100% happy living out of a suitcase. I have me personally, I have utter no fear personally around. Even today, I could, if it were just me, I'd come and sleep on your couch with a suitcase and have an absolutely fabulous time starting something from scratch. So I'm not. I've got zero fear around that. But I've got little kids now.
Who, let's face it, all of you sleeping on the sofa is going to be a bit cramped.
There's not going to be a lot of sleeping. There's going to be a lot of palmed up faces and all that sort of stuff.
So one of the other things that you've done or still do, Daniel, is I know that you are very much into giving, very much into fundraising, and that even some of the initial strategy sessions and things that you run, you actually just ask for a donation to charity. And how did that come about in terms of, again, was it fairly early on in your career that you knew you wanted to do that, or has it evolved as you've become, more stable in the businesses you're running? And how did you, sorry, my feeling is that you very much, it's a very important part of your business. It's not something that is supplemental to the business.
It's really baked into the DNA.
Yeah.
So that was down to a couple of mentors that I had at about 25, 26, who I saw what they were doing and the way they were using their businesses as a force for good. And I just thought, that's how I want to do it. I really like the idea that entrepreneurs fundamentally are people who love to solve problems, and that the types of problems that we can and should solve are not just commercial problems, but we can solve humanitarian problems with the same thinking. And I also discovered that it's not a zero-sum game. That, when you give a lot of money away, it's as if by magic, all sorts of amazing stuff shows up back in return. So, when we go and do fundraising for Charity Water, and then Scott Harrison, the founder of Charity Water, says, "Hey, can I run an event with you guys in London?" And we say, we say, "Can we co-create an event that will tell 200 people about Charity Water, and we'll take them through what it is and how it works." We'll just do that completely from a space of, we want Charity Water to succeed in London. And at the end of the night, we introduce 200 people to Charity Water, and they make their pledges and their commitments to do something. And an amazing partnership comes out of it with an alcohol distillery, and all sorts of stuff comes out. But what's also incredible is that just a ton of interest comes towards us as well, right? So we end up with a lot of business and partnerships and all this sort of stuff as a perfectly effortless byproduct. So I've found that it's not something that actually takes anything from you. If done correctly, it's a partnership in every sense of the word.
And do you, within the organization, within your team of people, is there an expectation that, sorry, I'm going to rephrase that, is part of the job description that there are charitable works that are going on? So whether that's organizing the event or being involved in it, as opposed to, again, it being something that they need to do on top of their normal job.
So we have core values as a company of to be brave, to have fun, and to make a dent. So essentially, being brave is stepping outside your comfort zone, doing things that weren't even asked of you, taking a little bit of a risk, moving in the right direction, even if you haven't got all the information. So that's what we mean by being brave. Having fun is communicating, bringing a sense of personality and play to the work. If you're not having fun, talking about it and discussing it until you can get back towards having fun. So being brave, having fun, and then making a dent is making an impact, doing something meaningful. So part of our values is that we do expect our team, and we do support our team to be doing all three of those things. And realistically, if you're not really engaged in the making a dent thing, then that's 1/3 of the core values. So we just don't really have people on the team who aren't interested in that, because we're so open about it. I mean, on day one, if you were to come and work with us, one of the very first conversations we'd be having with you is, can we share with you the core values and what they mean to us, and how that will impact your role on a day-to-day basis. And we say, look, genuinely, if you're not up for those core values, there's a bunch of other stuff that we talk about as well, but one of the conversations is, if you're not up for those core values, this isn't the place, you're not going to last.
And is that part of making sure that apart from that, your core values are met, but that your team is a team, is back to that tribe, back to that family of all having, something that they work towards and they all believe in together?
Yeah. So what holds teams and tribes together is, shared vision, shared values, shared mission. And the stronger and clearer those things are, the more the team just sticks together, and they also know what's expected. The other thing too is that as a owner of a business, you want to trust that the right conversations are happening when you're not in the room. And by having strong values baked into the team, they often will ask the question, what would we do if we were being brave? What would be the most fun thing to do here? How would we make the biggest dent with this project? So the values drive the conversations, and then maybe they don't even ask it in those particular words, but that level of conversation always comes out. And that's what I want from them. If I'm not in the room, I want them thinking, how do I be braver? How do I be more fun? And how do I be more impactful? So it's baked in.
It's just there, as you say, just part of the business, just the way the business is.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about your books now. You've written 4 books.
Yep.
And bestseller, and Key Person of Influence was the one that I think led to the Key Person of Influence accelerator. Is that right?
Sort of. The accelerator was up and running, and then I wrote the book as a way of helping to scale it. So we'd actually run our first group of 30 people through the program. And it was very much a lot of the key ideas that we were discussing in that first program came out in version 1 of the book as a way of communicating, this is what we're up to in the world, this is what we're doing, this is what we're thinking, and this is a great way for you to discover it. So the product was there first before the book, but the book has been just a really great way to grow it and scale it.
And one of the things I noticed on some of the information that you sent me was that when you're speaking, you're not just speaking to entrepreneurs, you're speaking to people in, the finance world, in different, my sense is that you're speaking to employees as well. How do they react to that? So again, if we were talking about the corporate world being different earlier, how do they respond to that entrepreneurial view and that influence and apply it?
There's mixed feelings because at the moment there's a feeling that even though you work at a corporate, that you are kind of like a personal brand anyway, and that you're not gonna. There's kind of, especially with millennials, there's a kind of an assumption that you're not going to stay with the same company for 40 years, which means you're going to have to kind of have a bit of a personal brand yourself, even if you take a corporate career. And then also there's a culture at a lot of organizations, which is we hide behind the brand. We don't stick our head up. We don't make any moves that kind of make ourselves stand out. We very much hide behind the logo. So naturally there's mixed feelings. And for those who embrace it, they very rapidly either move up the organization or out to an organization that wants that. And the more they've got a personal brand, the more they just keep going.
So as you say, it's taking that forward in a slightly different way, but developing it. Do you think that it inspires any of them to actually leave the corporate world and become...
Massively. If I think I could probably set up a business as an outplacement organization that basically they just put me in front of the people that they want to leave and let me talk for a couple of hours, and about a third of them will just leave and save the company many thousands in redundancy fees. It's absolutely been the case. There's been so many corporates that have actually put their people on our events, and very rapidly the person goes and does what we say, and it either flies really well with the corporate or it doesn't, and they don't, secretly they don't like their people standing out, in which case the person goes, that's kind of cool, I've already got 5 other opportunities going, so I'm ready to rock and roll.
Well, that must be a great feeling for you as well, to know that you are inspiring people and you are helping people to make those changes to their lives that they want to see.
Yeah, let's hope it works.
That's right. Fingers crossed. Daniel, how do you maintain the balance in your life? How do you look after yourself and keep yourself, healthy and well, and, mentally well as physically, and balancing that, with your family, with the business, with the children, the third one on the way,
yeah,
all of those different things demanding your time?
I think a key thing for me is doing things that are high on my values and being okay with not doing things that aren't high on my values. So just being aware of what makes me tick. And so, for example, surprisingly, really, really surprisingly, spending time every day with the kids is actually high on my values. And probably not looking after the kids all day is not high on my values, because that kind of is difficult. But absolutely, being there for bedtime, bath time, and spending some good quality time every single day. So that really kind of sucks, because there's some amazing events that I could be going to in the evenings, and there's some phenomenal things that I say no to. I mean, God, there's just remarkable travel that I get invited to go on, every month, and it just needs to be that I'm just okay with missing out on that stuff, because actually, what I really like doing is doing simple stuff with the kids, and I quite like having really boring weekends, just going down the local park and sitting there and playing in the sandpit, and I like doing bedtime, bath time, and it's just, I just have to be okay that I'm not going to squeeze every little last drop of juice out of the orange, and I'm going to miss some great opportunities. But so being okay and accepting that, but also there are certain things where I say, it's high on my values to do, to prioritize certain things, and in which case, there's just certain times where we just need to spend the money on a nanny, and free up the time to do certain things that are high on the values. So yeah, there's that. I also think, there is, to an extent, there is just I find it, I think it would be incredibly difficult for a lot of families to do business and family if they weren't at a certain place financially, because I don't know how we would actually, I don't know how I would actually run my business if I didn't have support that I could just call upon and know that it was good and helpful, and that's not cheap. It's really expensive. So I guess that's the honest answer. I've got help.
No, which is great, because we all have to figure out the ways that we deal with things. And if you've got the money, you've got the help, you've got the confidence in those people that are helping you, as you say, it helps you at those times to make the decision that is the right decision for you. And knowing that, the majority of the time, the children are your priority. You want to spend the time with them, you want to support them. So I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with having help, whether it's paid for help, whether it's family help, whoever it is that's helping you to know that you're doing what's best all round, or what's the best it could be. It's never necessarily 100%.
Exactly. We're juggling, successfully juggling. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. So, Daniel, thank you very much. I really, have enjoyed talking to you. And just before we wrap up, are there any, I guess, sort of final things, anything that you'd like to say, to the listeners, any advice or any last words?
Look, one of the things that I often say is that I love to always highlight this issue of proximity bias. Proximity bias is essentially, whenever you listen to somebody else's story, it always sounds phenomenal or interesting, or because you're getting a very one-dimensional view of someone else's life. And I used to listen to a lot of my mentors and heroes and kind of like think, that they've got it all figured out, and that would cause me to go take advantage or go chasing opportunities that were somebody else's opportunity. And actually, what we've discovered from working with thousands of entrepreneurs is that all of them are sitting on unbelievable, valuable intellectual property, ideas, case studies, stories, examples. And the key idea here is that when you climb up a mountain, you stand on top of the mountain, you look out at everything else, but the one thing you can't see is the mountain that you're standing on. And the one thing that I've learned from spending so much time with thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs is that most people don't recognize the mountain of value that they're standing on. So if there's one big lesson that I've learned through this whole journey, is that the answers and the value and the game change and the phenomenal thing is like right under your nose. It's way closer than you think. It's the stuff that you take for granted. That's the stuff that you should be placing more highly value on. It's never ever ever some random thing that's way over there that you've only just discovered. It's always the thing that changes your life is right under your nose.
And how do you find it? Because as you say, you're standing on it, you're looking at all of the other things, you're admiring what everybody else is doing.
Get around there. There's some rare people who know how to spot it, and they, sometimes they're coaches or consultants, sometimes they're training programs, sometimes they're friends who know you well. Often they're people who have actually got a bigger, more successful business. In the business world, it's often people who've got a bigger, more successful business who actually can recognize how your business would scale. And it's asking questions, around, can I unpack this and talk it through and see if there's any value that I'm sitting on that I'm missing. It's having really kind of curious and powerful conversations with smart people, because you can't see yourself. You need someone else to spell it out for you. You need someone else to go, hey, wait a second, are you saying that you did work with that company and you solved that problem and it was worth that amount of money to them, and like 12 people, saved their jobs and this happened and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, that could be really valuable to these other 15 companies, and maybe you should write a book about it. Maybe you should create a training program. Maybe you should put some software together around how you did that. So you need someone else to kind of get it, kind of hear what you've been up to and get excited about it and go, whoa, okay, I think you're onto something there, But the key is that, don't get lost in, maybe I should be a property developer. Maybe I should trade in Bitcoin. Maybe I should, go get involved in, some technology startup. It's like, no. Maybe you should do what you've actually been doing, but just do it a different way.
So it's recognizing your strengths and what people are going to value from your strengths. That is really fantastic, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thank you.
You've been listening to me, Deborah Levitt, in conversation with Daniel Priestley, co-founder and CEO of Dent Global, professional speaker, best-selling author, and entrepreneur. Thank you for listening to the first season of Bridging Gaps, the business podcast. This was the last episode in season 1, and I'll be taking a break over August. Season 2 starts on the 2nd of September, and there's a great lineup of guests ready to provide inspiration and more for you. I am planning at least one special event in August, so do keep an ear out for it. I'll be posting about it on the new Bridging Gaps, the business podcast Facebook page, as well as my normal Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn accounts. Just look for Bridge Road Consultants or on LinkedIn, Deborah Levitt. Feel free to drop me a message at any point if you'd like to know more about what I've got in store or just want to talk about podcasts in general. When I come back, I'm in conversation with James Thompson. James is Managing Director of Spokes of Bagshot and is a really interesting and inspiring guy. I think you'll really enjoy the conversation. So please make sure that you join us on 2nd of September. Have a great August, and I hope that you catch the special event in the middle of August. Take care and have a wonderful summer. The number of people listening to podcasts is increasing year on year as people look to break free from their screen and consume information on the go. If you'd like to know more about podcasts, then please go to what'sthisIhear.bridginggaps.uk. Are you considering your own podcast? Why not check out So You Think You Want Your Own Podcast? It's an online course that introduces you to everything that's involved in hosting a podcast, as well as working with you to define your own podcast concept. You can get more information on it at startyourownpodcast.bridginggaps.uk. Bridging Gaps, the business podcast, was produced by Deborah Levitt of Bridge Road Consultants Limited, with original music provided by Pete
You've been
Dineley.
listening to Deborah Levitt on Bridging Gaps, the business podcast.